What if you die every night? The physics of consciousness. Explained you closed your eyes last night. For hours you were gone. Not traveling, not thinking, not watching the darkness. Just absent. And then, this morning, you opened your eyes again. You remembered your name. You recognized your room. You picked up exactly where you left off. But here's the uncomfortable question. Was that really you who woke up? Or was it someone new? Someone who inherited your memories, your face, your unfinished thoughts, and simply continued the story? Tonight, you'll do it again. You'll lie down, and the person you are right now, the one listening to these words, will vanish. 8 hours from now, someone will wake up in your bed, convinced they're you. This isn't a ghost story. It's a question about physics, about biology, about what it actually means to be a continuous self in a universe that replaces everything all the time. Let's think carefully about what happens when you sleep. What you could mean. Before we can ask whether you survived the night, we need to define what you even are. This turns out to be harder than it sounds. Let's try 3 different answers, 3 different ways of pointing at the thing we call a self. First, you could be a biological organism, a body, a particular arrangement of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and a few dozen other elements, assembled into cells, tissues, organs. You're a human animal that was born on a specific date and will die on another. You breathe, you metabolize, you maintain a temperature. From this view, as long as this organism persists, you persist. Simple enough. Except your body isn't actually a fixed object. Your red blood cells live for about 4 months, then they're recycled. The cells lining your stomach replace themselves every few days. Even your bones, which feel so permanent, are constantly dissolving and rebuilding. Proteins fold and unfold. Molecules drift in and out. Some parts last longer than others. Most of the neurons in your cerebral cortex, the ones involved in memory and thought, have been with you since childhood. But even those neurons are replacing their components. The synaptic proteins, the receptors, the mitochondria all turn over on timescales of days to weeks. So the biological you is more like a process than a thing. A pattern of maintenance and replacement that keeps the same rough shape, but never the same parts. That brings us to the second answer. You could be information. Not the meat, but the pattern. Your memories, your knowledge, your personality, your habits, your fears, your sense of humor. The specific configuration of synaptic weights in your brain. The web of associations that makes you recognize your mother's voice and remember that you hate cilantro. This version of you could theoretically survive in different substrates. If we could scan your brain perfectly and recreate that pattern somewhere else, would it still be you? Depends on whether you think identity lives in the information or in the specific matter carrying it. But there's a third answer, and it's the one that makes sleep so strange. You could be the experience itself. The moment-to-moment flow of awareness. The feeling of being someone right now reading these words. That private, subjective stream of consciousness that philosophers call phenomenal experience. This version of you doesn't care about cells or data. It's about the lights being on, the presence of an observer. And here's the problem. This version of you absolutely, definitely stops existing every single night. What happens when the lights go out? When you fall asleep, you don't experience time passing. You know this already, but it's worth sitting with how strange that is. You can sleep for 8 hours, and from the inside, it feels like a jump cut. One moment you're closing your eyes, the next you're opening them. The hours in between simply don't exist for you. During deep sleep, there's no one home. Your brain is active, tremendously active, but it's not generating the kind of unified, coherent experience we associate with being awake. You're not having a long, dark thought. You're not meditating in blackness. There's no experience happening at all. Even during REM sleep, When you dream, the experience is fragmented, untethered from your waking identity. You rarely know who you are in a dream. You accept impossible things. The self that exists in dreams is not the same self that plans your Tuesday morning. Your brain during sleep is doing critical work. It's sorting memories, deciding what to keep and what to discard. It's clearing out metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, literally flushing toxins from the spaces between neurons. It's adjusting synaptic strengths, consolidating learning, running maintenance routines that can't happen while you're awake. But none of that work requires you to be there subjectively. Consciousness, the experience of being someone, is offline. Now you might say, but I'm still alive. My heart beats, my body breathes, the brain is still running. True, but we're not asking if the organism survives. We're asking if the experiencer, the conscious witness, persists through the gap. And the answer from neuroscience is no, not in any meaningful sense. When you wake up, consciousness boots back up. Neuron populations synchronize. Thalamic regions start broadcasting signals to the cortex. The default mode network, which seems to underlie self-referential thought, comes back online. And suddenly, there's an I again, an observer, a point of view. But is it the same observer? The illusion of continuity. Here's what makes it feel continuous. Memory. When you wake up, you remember falling asleep. You remember yesterday, last week, your childhood. You have access to the same store of facts and experiences. So naturally, you conclude, I'm the same person. I just took a break. But memory is a story your brain tells you, not a video recording. Every time you recall something, you're reconstructing it. You're not retrieving a file. You're rebuilding the experience from fragments, and in the process, you change it slightly. Memory is creative. It's generative. And it's very good at creating the feeling of continuity, even when the underlying reality is full of gaps. Think about this. You don't remember most of your life. You don't remember being 3 months old, even though you were conscious at times, even though you were there in some sense. You don't remember most of last Tuesday. You don't remember what you were thinking about at 3:47 p.m. 2 weeks ago. And yet, you feel like the same person who lived through all of that. The continuity is a story, a narrative thread your brain weaves to make sense of itself. And it's a very convincing story. Evolutionarily, it has to be. An organism that couldn't integrate its past with its present wouldn't survive long. But stories aren't the same thing as identity. Here's an example that might clarify the strangeness. Imagine you had a condition where every time you fell asleep, all your memories were erased. When you woke up, you'd have no idea who you were. You'd have to learn your name, reintroduce yourself to your family, start from zero. Would you still be the same person? Would the organism in the bed be you? Most people would say no. That person, despite having your body, your DNA, your face, wouldn't be you anymore. Because identity, as we experience it, depends on psychological continuity, on memory. Now reverse it. Imagine your memories were perfectly preserved, but your brain was paused, frozen in liquid nitrogen, for a year, then thawed and restarted. Would you have experienced that year? No. Would you feel like the same person? Probably yes. So consciousness, the actual experience, can be absent. And as long as memory bridges the gap, the self feels continuous. But feeling continuous and being continuous aren't the same thing. Patterns in motion. Let's think about this from a physics perspective. In physics, we don't talk about souls or essences. We talk about patterns, configurations, information encoded in matter and energy. A hurricane is a pattern in the atmosphere. It has a name, a location, a shape. It persists for days or weeks. But the air molecules that make up the hurricane are constantly changing. The water vapor that's in the storm right now will be somewhere over the ocean in an hour. The hurricane doesn't contain specific molecules. It's a self-sustaining process, a vortex that moves through matter but isn't made of any particular piece of it. Is a hurricane the same hurricane from one hour to the next? It's a matter of definition. We can track it. We can say it's continuous. But there's no core, no essential substance that defines its identity. You are similar. You're not a fixed object. You're a process, a self-maintaining pattern of information running on biological hardware that's constantly being replaced. Here's a new way to think about it. Imagine a city. A city has an identity. Paris is Paris. Tokyo is Tokyo. That identity persists over centuries. But nothing about the city is permanent. Buildings are torn down and rebuilt. Streets are repaved. The people living there are entirely different every 100 years. Even the river running through it is new water every moment. What makes Paris still Paris? It's the pattern, the layout of streets, the relationships between neighborhoods, the accumulated history encoded in architecture, in culture, in the collective memory of its institutions. If a fire destroyed every building in Paris tomorrow, but the city was rebuilt exactly as it was, stone for stone, window for window, would it still be Paris? Or would it be a replica? There's no objective answer. It depends on what you think identity is made of. Now here's the key part. The city doesn't experience time continuously. There's no unified consciousness of Paris. The city exists as a pattern, whether anyone is awake to witness it or not. But you're not just a pattern. You're a pattern that experiences itself. And that makes the sleep question much stranger. When the lights go out, the pattern is still there. Your memories are stored. Your personality is encoded. The synaptic configuration that makes you you is intact, just dormant. But the experience, the subjective feeling of being that pattern, is gone. So when you wake up, the pattern resumes. The process restarts. Consciousness flickers back on. But is it the same flame or a new one lit from the same match? Two ways to see it. Let's be honest about what we don't know. Science can tell us what happens to the brain during sleep. We can measure neural activity, track memory consolidation, watch the brain's maintenance processes. We understand a lot about the biological and informational continuity. But science cannot tell you whether subjective experience, the what it's like to be you, is continuous or discrete. Because consciousness isn't something we can measure directly. We can measure its correlates, the brain states that accompany it. But the experience itself, the qualia, the feeling of being someone, is private. It's the one thing in the universe that's only accessible from the inside. So we're left with two interpretations, and neither can be proven wrong. Interpretation 1. You are the pattern. As long as the information is preserved, as long as your memories carry forward and your personality remains intact, you survive. Sleep is just a pause in experience, not a break in identity. The self is continuous because the process is continuous, even if the subjective stream has gaps. This is the view most neuroscientists would lean toward. It's practical. It's consistent with how we talk about identity in everyday life. When you say, "I'm the same person I was yesterday," you're not claiming your consciousness never blinked off. You're claiming a deeper continuity. Interpretation 2. You are the experience, the conscious observer, and that observer genuinely dies every night. What wakes up in the morning is a new instance, a new spark of awareness, one that inherits the memories and personality of the previous instance, and so believes itself to be continuous. From this view, you are not a single being living one long life. You're a chain of brief selves, each lasting a waking cycle, each convinced they're the only one. This sounds dramatic. It sounds like science fiction. But it's not obviously wrong. If experience is all that matters, if the feeling of being someone is what constitutes identity, then the gaps are real deaths and the awakenings are real births. Here's the uncomfortable part. You can't tell the difference from the inside. If you died last night and someone new woke up this morning with all your memories, they would feel exactly like you feel right now. They'd have no reason to doubt their continuity. They'd look back on their life and see an unbroken story. So maybe that's what happens. Maybe it's been happening every day of your life. Or maybe the self is robust enough to survive the gaps. Maybe continuity of information is enough. Maybe the pattern, not the moment-to-moment flame, is what we really are. Science can't tell you which interpretation is true, because both are consistent with everything we observe. Closing. So tonight, when you lie down, pay attention. Notice the edge of consciousness. That moment when you're drifting off, when thoughts become untethered and the world starts to dissolve. You won't remember it. You won't experience the hours that follow. You'll disappear completely. And something that believes it's you will wake up tomorrow. Does that bother you? Does it matter? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe knowing that the pattern persists is enough. Maybe the story is all that counts. Or maybe there's something profound in recognizing how fragile this moment is, how temporary, how each waking stretch of your life is its own finite thing, bookended by oblivion. We spend a lot of time thinking about the death that comes at the end, but we ignore the little deaths, the nightly erasures, the gaps we skip over without a thought. Physics can tell us that patterns persist. Biology can show us how the brain maintains itself. But neither can tell us what it means to be the pattern, to live inside the story, to be the brief flame that thinks it's eternal. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If you knew for certain that you wouldn't wake up tomorrow, that someone else would continue your story, would you live today differently? And if not, what does that tell you about what you really are? Let me know what you think.